Why do we need a new year for trees? Well, one thing that is in the Torah is in the laws of agriculture, there's a requirement to leave the fruit of fruit trees unharvested for the first 3 years. In the 4th year, you can eat it personally. And then in the 5th year and beyond, you can do whatever you want, buy, sell, plant, cross, all the other stuff of agriculture. But that in the first 3 years that a tree produces its fruit, according to the Torah, you have to let its fruit just go. You can't prune it, harvest it, work a fruit tree in that way. And the Torah doesn't really offer a reason for that. But the reason seems fairly self-evident, that just like you let any plant grow a little bit and solidly root and become more established and mature, it's a way of guaranteeing that the long-term benefit of the tree. And fruit-bearing trees can live longer than people. That the long-term benefit of the tree survives beyond just the first couple of years, and that you don't kill it by harvesting all of its fruit in the first few years. Now, in order to know how old the fruit tree is, you have to have a date that acts as the counter for years. Just like it used to be that you would say of a king, he's in the 5th year of his rule. All of those dates were started at an arbitrary time. So if a fruit tree bears fruit before Tu B'Shvat, after Tu B'Shvat, it is in its 2nd year of bearing fruit. If a fruit tree doesn't bear any fruit before Tu B'Shvat, then when it bears fruit that year, that is its 1st year of fruit bearing. Okay, so maybe that seems esoteric or very narrow focus for Tu B'Shvat, and maybe it is, unless you're actually growing fruit trees in an agriculture, in an orchard. It doesn't have much to do with us. But our ancestors were farmers, especially when they were in Eretz Israel. And a lot of the Tu B'Shvat Seder has to do with focusing on the land of Israel, on the connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, and on our connection to and what we can learn about ourselves and our spiritual life from trees and fruit. Now, as Mandy said, a couple of rabbis made it up. The date itself is set. It's one of those great examples of where the rabbis did something very, very practical. This is the time when the earliest fruit trees in the land of Israel start to blossom. And so this is the moment when fruit starts to grow in the land of Israel, in that latitude. And so the date may be arbitrary, though it's the full moon of the month. Tu B'Shvat means the 15th of the month. So tonight, if you could see the moon, you would see that it's a full moon at the beginning of the fruiting season. So it does make some sense, but so much of what we're going to do tonight is not found in any of the classical sources. There's no biblical Tu B'Shvat Seder. There's no Talmudic Tu B'Shvat Seder. The earliest Tu B'Shvat Seders were really sort of mystical, Hasidic, deeply mystical ventures into the mystical teachings of trees and what they have to teach us. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of that tonight too. Okay, any questions up to there? Otherwise, we're going to jump right in. Let's see, I want to share my screen here. Okay.
Rabbi Norry, it's Danny.
Yes, Donnie.
What did you say they did with the fruit the first 3 years?
I'm sorry, ask your question again.
On what year could they eat the fruit, and what years did they do the other years?
So the other years, you basically have to let the fruit fall. And either just, feed the animals and the critters and spread the seeds, or let it just harvest the land right around the tree. I mean, not harvest, nourish the land right around the tree. And then in the fourth year, you can eat of it yourself. Okay. It's a small allowance. It's the Revi'it, the fourth year. There's a whole little section in the Gemara about that. After that, you can sell it, eat it, use it in any way, in manufacturing or, press olive oil, any of those things. But in the first 3 years, you just have to let the fruit fall.
Oh, wow. Okay. It didn't go like to the Kohanim or anything like that.
No. That's all in addition to. All of the tithing is in addition to this. This seems strictly agricultural, really. Okay. It has it has long-term economic benefits, right? It asks you to delay gratification, right? As a farmer, but it's not related to the temple per se. Okay. Although I don't think first fruits are required of trees pre-4th year. I think you have to bring bikurim after the 4th year. I could be wrong about that, but I think so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the way to.
Okay, so what we're going to try to do tonight, and I hope you'll take a look at my incredible fruit tray here. Everything that I have in front of me tonight is in one way or another fruit. What makes a fruit a fruit? Can you see here up at the top of this sheet? I have to move the toolbar to see that. Hold on a second. And God said, behold, this is from Genesis 1:29. Does somebody else want to read? It's like a Seder, so where you can go around and people can read.
I will.
Go for it.
Here. And God said,
do you have the Maxwell house, Agata?
No, we have this one.
Okay, sure. Okay, good. So long as we're using the same one.
And God said, behold, I have given you every herb yielding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree that has seed yielding fruit. To you, it shall be for food.
This is the first rule of kashrut, of proper eating in the Torah. And it happens in the very first chapter of the Torah, when we are told that the proper human diet is fruits and vegetation. And there's two basic kinds. Much of what I want us to focus and think on tonight is how we can know God through the ordinary things of life. And tonight, those ordinary things mean just a simple small fruit, just an olive or a fig, something so simple, and yet maybe it can teach us something, give us some repair in our spiritual perspective. So one of the things we're going to look at is how we divide things and make categories of the food, why there are different blessings for certain foods, how you bless vegetables versus how you bless fruits, versus how you bless herbs, versus how you bless other things which people may have made, like bread, wine. In the first chapter of Genesis, we're told that we're to eat two kinds of food. One is vegetables, every herb, green thing that yields seed. And so I want you to think about like a carrot. A carrot grows a flower, and the flower has lots of little seeds. Each carrot creates dozens, hundreds of small seeds in its flower. Each seed capable of producing a new carrot, a new plant, which produces a flower, which produces many, many more. But when you pull the carrot out of the ground, you pull the whole thing out of the ground. The flower, the leaves, the vegetable itself. And in order to grow another carrot, you have to plant another seed. That's the first kind of food. And all vegetables fall into that kind of category. Cauliflower, spinach, carrots, onions, anything that grows a flower, that produces seed, that then each seed produces and perpetuates life. And of course, the great miracle of all that is that our world contains food which self-perpetuates. The world was meant to feed us, and we were meant to be fed from what grows naturally from the earth. The second kind of food is all of these things that we have here today, fruits. And fruits are different because they are every tree. They're a tree. In other words, the structure itself remains that has seed yielding fruit. And the fruit grows on the tree. And when I pick the fruit, unlike the carrot, I haven't taken the whole plant. I just have one fruit. And the tree remains to grow each and every year. I don't have to plant another citrus tree in order to grow another tree. I mean, in order to grow another orange, I would have to do it to grow another tree. But then that tree would produce fruit for its whole life, capable within each seed-yielding fruit is the seed of the next generation. And in that, of course, is the analogy to us. We are like the fruit. We are like trees. We contain the seed of future humans. Still, the only way to make a person is with other people. And we are literally fruit. Some of us are literally fruity, but that's a whole other story. Okay, so how do we proceed through the Seder? Well, I want to, we're going to do 4 different sections because Seders deal in 4s. We're going to make certain blessings, primarily over the fruit of the vine, if you have wine or grape juice with you, and then over all the fruit that we're going to eat, more or less has the same blessing. But as you'll see, I'm being a little loose with how I interpret fruit, and we'll talk a little more about that later. I want you to try, I hope you all got the shopping list. Did you get the shopping list, or did you just raid your refrigerator at least and your pantry? So we want to try and eat one kind of each of 4 or 5 different fruits. The first one we're going to look at is where you eat the outside of the fruit, but you don't eat the inside of the fruit. So what are some examples of this?
I really wanted peaches for this, but we couldn't find any peaches at the grocery today.
Here, by the way, is a little alphabetical list that gives you some help, like peaches, right? So all of the stone fruit. I'm using Dried cherries. I got some dried cherries. Those are really yummy. So that's sort of my stone fruit. Although there's also things like olives or dates. Anything with a large pit on the inside that you don't eat, but that has something soft on the outside, like the olive or the date or the peach or the cherry. Okay, so where in the Torah does it list the blessings that we say over which different fruits? Come on, Mandy. You know.
I don't know.
You had the right answer before.
Oh, it's not in the Torah?
It doesn't.
Oh.
No, the formulation Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam is not found in the Torah.
No, that's
No,
news to
that's
me.
not in there. That's the rabbis. Do you know where you can find that?
In your Siddur?
You can find it in the Siddur. Do you know where it comes from in the Siddur? It's older than that.
The Mishnah?
That's right. You can find it in my Thursday Mishnah class. That's my second pitch for the Thursday Mishnah class for everybody to come. And in fact, we're going to be studying the passage in which the different blessings for different kinds of food are listed. Now, I want to point something out here before we say our first blessing. What's that?
A tomato.
A tomato.
That's a fruit.
You know what I'm going to ask. Is it
It's
a fruit? Is it a vegetable?
No, it's a fruit.
It's a fruit. When we say a blessing on tomatoes or cucumbers or bell peppers, well, where are my bell peppers? I was supposed to have some bell peppers here. What blessing do we say? Do we say the vegetables blessing, Borei Pri Ha'adama, or do we say the fruit blessing, Borei Pri Ha'etz?
Yep.
Now think about our taxonomy from this passage. We have herb yielding seed. Is this more like a carrot, or is this more like an apple? It's more like an apple.
Well,
I can-
apple.
Yeah, I
Depends where
can
you're
pick.
growing
I
it.
can pick this off the vine. It grows on a vine, just like this little. You have a grape and you have a grape tomato. It's not a coincidence, I don't think.
What differentiates that from a berry though? Because I thought berries grew on vines and fruit grew on trees.
Berries is interesting because you have several different kinds of berries. For berries, I have blueberries tonight. And these are some exceptionally good blueberries that I got today. But blueberries are a little different than things like strawberries and raspberries, which have seeds on the outside of them. I can't remember the scientific name for raspberries, but it's a single piece of fruit that's made up of lots of little pieces. Right? Like if you look at a raspberry, it's got lots of little pieces. So some fruits grow on vines and that live, like raspberry bushes live through. You don't pull the whole plant out to harvest the raspberries. Right? They're like a tree in that way. So the halacha is very interesting on this in terms of the blessings question. Even though we are told about how to think in the very first chapter about these things in a certain way, the halacha categorizes them primarily by how they are used, not by their biology. I guess we would say their botany. In other words, the tomato may very well be more a fruit than a vegetable, but we don't really use it as a fruit. We use it as a vegetable. Same with cucumbers. All the salsa, cucumbers, peppers, carrot, eggplants, tomatoes, All of those are actually fruits that we use as vegetables. And so when you say a bracha on them, you would say borei peri ha'adama, which is the blessing for vegetables.
It's for how you use them, not the.
Correct. Tonight, we're going to say borei pri ha'etz on everything, with two exceptions. The two human-made foods that have their own
Wine
blessing.
and the cracker.
Wine and bread. So first, I'd like you to, if you have wine, get some wine. Some people have a custom at their Tu B'Shvat Seder to make different cups of wine, like this Passover Seder, 4 cups of wine, and to blend white and red wine, so that you have 1 cup that's all red, 1 cup that's red with a little white, 1 cup that's half and half, and 1 that's white with a little red. We'll talk more about these 4 cups and about the 4 levels of experience in a little bit, as we get into the mystical side of it a little more. But the same blessing is said for red and for white wine. So if you have wine, you lift your cup with me, and we'll say it all together. This one, the Borei Pri HaGefen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri HaGefen. Then you can really go in any order that you want here. With I'm going to go in the order that I have them listed here, eating the outside but not the inside. And I'm going to use for that my cherries. So if you get one of those fruits that you eat the outside but not the inside, and think about yourself and how this can reflect you. What is the core essential seed within you? The thing that is essential, that is the seed of you. And what things about you are more soft and superficial? What things about you sustain the future, and what things about you hold that future itself? As you think about that and you take this fruit in your hand, we say the blessing over fruit all together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri ha'etz. Praise are you, Adonai, our God, who rules the universe, who creates fruit from the trees. And we say Amen. And then let's say Shechianu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'hibyanu lazman hazeh. Good. So now that we said the blessing once, even though we'll say it again in our learning tonight, you can feel free to snack as you eat. Okay, the Seder starts. Once you say the blessing on the green vegetable, you can have a salad. So it's the same here. And we'll work our way through some of these different fruits and foods as we talk about them. I also want us to hold the Seder tonight as an act of Jewish environmentalism, where we think seriously about what it would mean if we didn't have trees, and the incredible interdependence which we as human beings have with trees. You literally cannot live without them. There are only a tiny handful of human cultures ever to live in places where there are no trees. Almost all of human material culture began not with metal or with plastic, but with wood. All basic human shelter was wood. We literally grew up in the trees. And without it, the only people I really know of who live without trees are like Inuit people who live where trees don't grow. And there's a reason why there's not very many of them. Because it's almost impossible for humans to live without fruits and vegetables. We need trees. I guarantee you could look around your room right now and eliminate almost everything in it if we didn't have trees. Paper, wood, furniture, your flooring, the framing of your house, the pencils, all the half the coloring and dyes that are in all of our clothing, much of our medicines, our chemistry, our clothing. We literally couldn't live with it. Anybody have a piano or a guitar or a violin? Not without trees, you don't. And there's a reason they don't make plastic violins, because they don't sound as good. So our tradition also has a lot of teachings about the incredible value of trees and how we should not take our physical environment for granted, and how incredibly important it is and deserving of our stewardship. So will someone read this little story? The story of Choni. It's a well-known story, and I like it. And someone else can read this short passage below it.
I'll read it.
Go for it, Marcia.
While the sage Choni was walking along a road, he saw a man planting a carob tree. Choni asked him, "How long will it take for this tree to bear fruit?" 70 years, replied the man. Choni then asked, "Are you so healthy a man that you expect to live that length of time and eat its fruit?" The man answered, "I found a fruitful world because my ancestors planted it for me. Likewise, I am planting for my children."
Nice. What do you all take from that?
Well, there's a beautiful magnolia tree right across the street from me. And they say magnolia trees take years and years and years. And so I'm wondering who planted it. Probably one of my neighbors 50, 60 years ago planted that magnolia tree, and it is gorgeous. And I'm enjoying it, even though it's my neighbor's. But somebody planted it and did not get to enjoy it, but I am.
I love that, Marcia, because I also live in a neighborhood with many magnificent magnolia trees. And they are, they're giant. And I'm sure they were all planted around the same time when the neighborhood that I live in was developed in the early 1960s. And so these are, these are old man trees already. Yeah, really, really important.
Another idea related to that is to leave the world better than you found it.
Nice. I don't know if you've heard this statistic. It's an interesting one, and it may or may not still be true, but that there is only one country in the entire world that has more trees at the end of the 20th century than at the beginning of the 20th century.
That's Israel.
That's Israel. Because it made a very concerted effort to plant trees in a place where they were not, where The Bible describes forested places in Israel which are not forested anymore. They were deforested a long time ago. And the world has deforested. It's really quite, it's a crisis in a lot of ways. Did you know that in the state of Georgia, with the exception of one state park, there is no old growth forest in the state of Georgia? Zero. Every square inch of forest in Georgia was harvested, and what's there now is new. New meaning post-colonial times. There is no old growth forest here. We have literally deforested the whole state, with the exception of this tiny little state park that somehow has a little old, grove of trees. And that's true almost, it's true across the country.
I don't
Across
know
the
if
world.
I don't know if this is 100% true, but it's pretty close. I saw this on the internet today that we lose 27,000 trees a day in the world to make toilet paper. But now their toilet paper is being made from bamboo, which grows really quickly, and it's a much more environmentally sound way to, produce toilet paper. And you can order it off the internet. Just Google bamboo toilet paper and you'll see 3 or 4 different ways, and they deliver it to you in a box.
Yeah. Paper is very difficult to make. Yeah. And takes a lot of trees. By the way, do you all know about grandfather trees? In places where they plant trees like for paper, where they plant pine trees to harvest pine trees, and they grow them for 5 years, and then they clear cut the whole thing, and they have little grids, and they move the grid around one year to the next. Actually, paper is very well managed, and the forestry for paper is pretty well managed. They more or less plant all the trees that they use at this point. But when they clear cut forests for harvest, they leave the biggest trees, 2 or 3 or 4 in a big area. They will leave the tallest, biggest trees. They call them grandfather trees. And the reason they leave them is because they found that the subsequent plantings grow better if a few really old, big trees are still there. Isn't that amazing? That the new planted trees are in some way aware of the older trees that live there and grow better, consistently grow better.
The reason is because the old trees communicate with the young ones and protect them. And in fact, that can be shown scientifically, actually.
Yeah. Hallelujah, I say. I mean, that is incredible.
Along with what Ed said, trees will also communicate with each other. If there's a tree that maybe needs more water, the other trees will reach their roots, or if it needs shade, they'll spread their branches somehow more. So they communicate with each other and they care for each other.
They might be smarter than us. Someone want to read this? The teaching of Shimon Bar Yochai.
I'll read it.
Yes.
Shimon Bar Yochai taught that if you are holding a sapling in your hand and someone says that the Messiah has drawn near, first plant the sapling and then go and greet the Messiah.
What do you take from that?
That the plant has precedence over that, because you have to plant the tree. This, I don't know, the sapling.
Right, that it is more important to take care of your planting than to go and greet the Messiah. That's a remarkable thing to say, I think. But nonetheless, it carries that importance of trees to us. And it allows us to, in our own tradition, to understand that our tradition values in a profound way the environment and the things which sustain the world around us, and through that sustain us. Nobody can make an apple. If you don't have apple trees, you don't have apples. That's it. No, I could give you all the raw chemicals, and you could, analyze an apple, have all of the things that you need, and I could give you every single thing that you need to make an apple, and you couldn't do it. The greatest chef in the world couldn't make the simplest food and fruit. And yet the earth offers it up for free. So let's eat our second category. Something where we're going to eat the inside, but not the outside.
That would be an orange. Would that be an orange?
Right, an orange. I have here a Jaffa sweetie from Israel, actually. We'll talk about Eretz Israel in a second. How about this one?
Coconut.
Yeah.
Or a grapefruit?
I have my special coconut opener. A grapefruit, any of the citruses, a banana. Nuts, which have a shell on the outside of them. Anything with a peel or a shell.
Pomelo.
A pomelo. Love those.
Pomelo.
I'm going to see if I can't whack this.
Tell us what a pomelo is. It's like a
Pomelo is a kind of citrus that is where the flesh is kind of dry. It's not quite so juicy. And it's sort of like a sweet grapefruit almost.
It looks
a
like
grapefruit.
it looks like a very large grapefruit, but it's a little bit sweeter and a little bit less juicy. And you peel it and eat the fruit, and we like them, so we buy them whenever they're available.
I love them. They're like you got to work.
Yes,
To eat them. They're not easy.
that's Ed's job.
I see. I see you've employed a professional.
We have a professional pomelo peeler.
Where do they sell them, Naomi?
They have them at Sprouts. I bought them at the Pig. Right now they're around. They were until about last week. I didn't see any today.
Do you all have like a Asian Chinese market?
Yes.
Because they also are part of Asian cuisine. So you often see them in like, if there's a large Asian market that has lots of the, unusual Asian produce kind of stuff, they might have them there too.
In Thailand.
So let's take one of these other fruits and we'll say the blessing again. Baruch atah Adonai borei pari ha'is.
You're eating the outside there. If you want another inside, he didn't have. No. Or the chocolate inside, I think.
I'd like us to, I'm not much of a chassid. I don't know, maybe you figured that out. I actually have some Hasidic lineage in my family a long time ago. But the way I was raised was not as a chassid and a mystic. I was raised more in the Maimonidean tradition, in the intellectual and logical of the Aristotelian Judaism, the Judaism of the Talmud and the rabbis, not of the Tanya and the Zohar. But Tu B'Shvat has roots as a Seder observance in the mystical community, in the early Hasidic community. And they did these Seders not so much to just learn and share together, but as a sort of a spiritual labyrinth journey, in a way of getting to know and understand God more through reflecting on trees. And I don't know, maybe you've seen this, the Sfirot, which is sort of a fundamental foundational teaching of Hasidic Judaism, that God can be understood by this map. And it's intentionally meant to seem like a tree with a crown at the top, just like a tree, the top three circles, emanations being the crown of the tree, those things which are far away, but which we can sort of see from down where we are. They're connected to us, of course, down through the things that are deeply rooted. The trees have a crown, they have body and branches and a trunk, and they have deep roots here in the world. Consider also how we think about a physical tree, that a tree has crown, branches, a trunk, and roots. And that the world exists in these four different experiences. Those things which we can sense, but which are far away from us. Those things which are the branches, the offshoots of our own experience, beyond us and yet still connected. The things which we ourselves, our own physical experiences, day to day, the routine pedestrian things of life, and then that which is hidden and unseen. But just like trees, did you know that there's as much underground for most trees as there is above ground? That if you measure the crown of a tree, that equals the measurement of its root base also? That what appears above also appears below the ground? And that if you could only see it differently, you would understand branches and roots as one and the same, or at least as part of the same experience. And so by reflecting on trees and their nature and their way and the diversity of it, and the different way in which it manifests itself, we also get to reflect on God and on the nature of God's presence within our world, and how we may only experience a small measure, a drop of red wine in the midst of white wine, or a small piece within a hard shell, that we may be able to experience God in a way that it can be reflected in the map, best understood by the metaphor of a tree. They wanted, in making the Seder, to change themselves. That's the roots of the Tu B'Shvat Seder. The Hasidim wanted to figure out a way to improve their own spiritual well-being, their own soul, some kind of internal tikkun that could be realized by reflecting on trees and on their fruit. And in that regard, I like Tu B'Shvat, and maybe I have a little bit of Chassid in me. And that speaks to me a lot. All right, any questions up to there? Anything y'all want to schmooze or talk about? Favorite trees that you have? I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Rabbi, I just want to tell a little story. My
Sure.
grandson, who lived in Pittsburgh, used to come visit us every summer when he was 9, 10, 11 years old. And every time we'd pick him up at the airport, he would say, I can always tell when I'm in Birmingham, I have never seen so many trees. When you fly over Birmingham,
Mhm.
you can tell how many trees we have. This is a very treed area.
That is wonderful, Marcia.
I've grown lots of fruit trees, and
Yes?
there's nothing quite as wonderful as seeing the tree blossom in the spring and the fruits develop and then harvesting the fruit. I've done that with apples and cherries and other kinds of fruit. And it's almost a miracle. In fact, it is a miracle.
It is. Yeah. We can't make it happen. We can facilitate it. We can help it along. We can push the parameters of it. But at the end of the day, we don't make it happen. Yeah.
Can I add a story?
Yeah, sure.
So my best friend named Christina, she has this whole metaphor that she uses when she talks about marriage and the ways that two people, their lives become intertwined, much like two trees. But a successful partnership occurs when your roots are together and you're strong at the base, but you still are able to be your own separate tree, maybe wrapped around each other, but you are able to grow your own fruits or provide your own shade or just kind of do what you need to do and have your own thing, but you have that base together of strength and of unity. And so anytime I think of trees, I always think of her and that like idea that she has behind it.
I like that a lot. I think, and trees do have this really unusual thing of being connected to each other and yet being individual. Roots do intertwine for mutual benefit often. And Mandy, I think the proof in what your friend describes is very often the experience that happens at the end of life when one of the two trees is gone. There's a gap. The roots are pulled, and there's roots without soil right next to them, right, are fundamentally jeopardized. And I've seen that more times than I can recall, in where two people who have spent a lifetime together and whose lives are literally intertwined with each other, and one is taken away, it leaves. It's not a figurative gap. It's real. Our rootedness, our being like trees. This is not just some, ooey gooey hokum kind of stuff. It actually works that way. We actually have these roots that reach into other people and their lives, and yeah, it's very real.
Yeah, I remember when I was still single and like dating, anytime I would have like a really bad breakup, I'd go in her office and just cry. And she's like, well, that just wasn't your tree. They were a palm tree and you're a pine tree, and that's okay. And so when I told her Ash and I were getting married, she's like, you found your tree. So it was really sweet.
That is very sweet. And of course, palm trees are also interesting. And the Torah references palm trees, right? What's a tzaddik katamar yifrach? A righteous person will flourish like a tamar. What's a tamar? A tamar is a date palm. Date palms. A date palm is one of these deep, deep tap roots, right? It grows a single root deep down into the ground. Unlike sort of, and the psalm compares it to grass that grows with these really shallow but very far-reaching tendril-like roots. Grass grows quick and then shrivels up just as quick. A righteous person is like a palm tree. Shatul al palge mayim, deeply rooted next to a source of water, right? Drawing from the deepest resources and reserves, but still it's got that one very, very deep, which takes a long time. It takes time to cultivate righteousness.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Thinking about this, that from a historical or sort of traditional perspective of celebrating a sort of Tu B'Shvat Seder, now we have grocery stores, but like most of the things other than sort of the dried stuff that we're eating, it's not seasonal, you know, that if it's springtime, nothing is yet actually fruiting.
Right. I don't think for them it was primarily about the fruit and the eating.
Okay.
I think they picked that date because it had the traditional connection with trees,
The agriculture,
and they wanted to really use the tree metaphor. So that was, you know, it made sense in that way. But I don't think that the earliest Sedarim, most of the early Sederim, not just the earliest ones, you know, what I'm doing is probably not what they were doing. They were studying Zohar and, you know, getting, you know, mystically worked up around the basic ideas, but not sampling fruit from all over the world. I mean, I got dragon fruit and stuff from Turkey and things from, you know, Southeast Asia and Israel and,
yeah,
right. I mean, it's in some ways, honestly, if I think about it, this is a historically unprecedented. I mean, nobody more than 100 years ago, probably even 50, maybe even less than that, could have ever even thought about yesterday evening after Shabbos, just running out to the store and picking up this.
I went at 5:30,
I mean,
so that's, you know.
Right, just coconut. I mean, most people never saw a coconut in their whole life in the history of humankind. You know, the compelling majority of people never saw a coconut in their whole life. So, much less a pomegranate or, you know, whatever, you know, avocados, right? So all that stuff is very local, and the globalization of it all is both exciting and also very unprecedented. Really, we don't really know. I'm always on the environmental level, Asher. I'm always a little torn when I go to the store. Like I went to the store and I like to get something unusual. Right, I got this dragon fruit. We're going to say Shechianu for eating the dragon fruit, something I haven't had in a long time. I was going to get lychees, fresh lychee, because that's like a really cool, unusual thing. they're grown in South Africa. You can't really get any farther away from Atlanta, Georgia, you know, than South Africa. And I was like, these tiny little lychees, they flew them here from South Africa. How is that like
And they would fly them
environmentally
there
friendly?
time before they would go bad too.
Right, exactly. I mean, on the other hand, there's a lychee farmer in South Africa, depending on Americans buying his lychees. And if I don't buy them, who's going to buy them? Right? There aren't enough South Africans eating lychees to sustain the South African lychee farmers. So it's complicated. In the end, I didn't buy them. But I probably bought something else that was also flown in here. Overnight, special to make it here. Yeah, something like that. It's complicated. Yeah, Rebecca.
I was actually about to ask that when you brought up the issue about the globalized purchasing of fruits from everywhere. A couple of years ago with a religious school, we did a Tu B'Shvat program on environmentalism. And I wonder, is there sort of historically a component of it for conservation or sustainability? I mean, that's something that COVID has derailed my own concentration on, but I used to be really, really careful. And I have, with all the takeout I've done in the past 2 years, I have not been as good as I used to be. And it's something that I want to get back to, and I want to encourage our Bethel community together to get back to being more sustainable. But I'm just curious as to historically or halakhically, if there's any commentary on that.
I think that it has become associated with a sense of Jewish environmentalism in our lifetime, Rebecca. It's the whole world is waking up to this kind of stuff. We're all figuring it out. And you know, 100 years ago, no, people didn't think like this. But 50 years ago, 30 years ago, yeah, Jews started to think this way, and early Jewish environmentalists understood that Tu B'Shvat had an important message. And for me, it carries with it a bunch of that. And I'm going to show you something in just a second. I'm going to take Mandy's question, and then I'm going to say something else about that. Okay, Rebecca? Yeah, Mandy.
Mine's actually more of it's a statement, not a question. I was just going to add on to your answer to Asher's question and make a little shameless, selfless plug for my book club. And the book that we're reading, My Jewish Year, the rabbi that the author consults about Tu B'Shvat said that they chose this date because it was at the end of the rainy season in Israel. And so it was the beginning of when trees would start to produce fruits and flower and that kind of thing. So it wasn't kind of like arbitrarily chosen necessarily, but it was like intentionally like, we're going to do this right at the beginning of the fruit bearing season. Also, if you're interested in learning more about Jewish holidays, having lots of fun conversations like this, join our book club. It's great. We meet on the second Wednesday of every month.
Yes, shameless plugs are welcome here.
Good, because I have a lot of them.
Okay, that's all good. Yeah, Robin.
Is there any difference with Tu B'Shvat either here or in Israel this year, with it being a Shemitah year? I wondered if it had any bearing on, since we're supposed to not be, or at least in Israel, no planting, allowing the fields to rest.
Yes, it. Hang on one second. I want to pull something up here. Shemitah is an interesting part of this because it ties in with so many of these other themes that we've touched on, like environmentalism and care for the land through agriculture, trusting in the natural free goodness of the food that grows out of the earth, caring for the environment and the long term, right? The having a moderated attitude towards agriculture, which understands that there's limits to consumption, which is obviously one of our world's most complicated, biggest problems, is we seem to live without limits to our consumption. Let me share something with you. Here's something interesting, I think. This is the amount of food produced that is lost and not actually consumed by people. 20% of the oil seeds and pulses is lost or wasted. That's enough olive oil to fill 11,000 Olympic-sized pools annually. And that's like the lowest number. 8% of fish caught globally is thrown back, in most cases dead, dying, or badly damaged. That's equal to almost 3 billion salmon. That's just an incomprehensible number of waste. 763 billion boxes of pasta, 3.7 trillion apples, 45% of global fruit and vegetables is lost. I mean, that is not the story of Choni saying, others planted for me, so I plant for them. That is not Shimon Bar Yochai saying, don't worry about the Messiah, take care of the plants. I read, this is not, it's not a personal indictment, it's a collective indictment, this kind of thing, what we're looking at right here. This is 100% a collective indictment of who we are and how we exploit the world around us. Here's another one.
I think packaging too has a lot to do with it, because living alone, sometimes I can only get the giant economy size package, and I don't have any use for that. So,
yeah,
you know.
A lot of that packaging is food packaging.
Yeah.
Right? It's more that we think of it as less, because when you just get a little packaging in your food, it's just a little, as opposed to like the big box that something comes in. But you only buy one of those things in the big box, and you buy, each year, you buy 50 of those other things.
Rabbi, I just want to share a story. I was in Publix, and the man was pulling stuff off the shelf. It was surimi, some that's artificial crab meat or whatever, but in a package. And he was pulling it off the shelf and putting it in a box. And I said, why are you doing that? He said, well, the date, it's a past due date. And I said, what do you do with that? He said, we throw it away. And I said, can't you give it to a homeless shelter or do something with it? It's just terrible to throw all that food away. He said, we used to, but we can't do that anymore. They won't accept it, because if someone gets sick, then we'll be sued. So anything that has a past due date, and you can usually use food even if it has a past due date, all that food is thrown away. And I understand Costco has to do the same thing. That's really horrible.
It's a lesson in unintended consequences. Hey, it's great to have a best if used by date. That's a great thing. What a great, wonderful consumer benefit. Until it becomes used as a way of making sure that you don't do something that's eminently logical to do. And I completely understand that situation. I've heard that same thing over and over again. And it's shameful. I just think the bottom line is that is shameful. If we can't figure that out, shame on us. Yeah. Okay, I want to do just one more thing, and that is talk about fruit of the land of Israel. Because whenever the Bible talks about fruit and agriculture, it's speaking very clearly about the specific land of Israel and the incredible land itself and the agriculture itself. It's not talking about politics. And here in Deuteronomy, we read a description that God gives, that Moses gives to the people as they're standing on the banks of the Jordan River at the end of the story. For Adonai your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and depths, springing forth, a land of wheat and barley and vines, that means grapes, and figs and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey. Honey here means dates, date palm honey, date honey. A land where you shall eat without scarceness, where nothing shall lack, and when you have eaten, you bless God for the good land which is being given to you. So this is both the root of Birkat Hamazon, to bless God for the good land which he has given us, and a reminder of 7 specific species which are considered the special species of the land of Israel, mentioned specifically by name in the Bible. Israel grows a lot of food. It's one of the few food positive nations in the world where they produce more food than they consume. Very few places do that. But Israel is one of them. But these 7 species are kind of very specific. And I more or less have them all in one form or another. 2 of them are grains, wheat and barley. So I have pita bread that's made from wheat, actually a fruit. Bread is fruit. And I didn't open the beer, but I have beer in the fridge, and that's made from barley malt, from malted barley syrup. So if you have beer, you're having barley as well. And then I have pomegranate. I have dates and figs. And I have grapes and olives, which I ate all of my olives already. And I think that's all 7 of them. Did I forget one somewhere in there? So if you have one of those, wheat or barley, dates or figs, olives, grapes, or pomegranates, take one of those. And if not, take one of the fruits which you can eat the whole thing. Something you can eat all of it, like a berry or figs. Those foods are a reminder of the Torah. because every single part of the Torah is good for us, the whole thing, all of it. So a fruit that we can eat the whole thing reminds us of those things which are in their entirety good, which don't have any negative side to them. So let's say the blessing one more time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri ha'etz. All right. Any questions, comments, favorite fruit or tree stories? Yes.
I have a comment. I totally enjoyed this with my community and the Seder, and it was so beautiful.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I
Thank
feel
you, Margaret.
so enriched. Thank you.
I have to say, I agree with Karen. I think this has been really lovely. Never done a Tu B'Shabbat Seder before, and this was really, really interesting.
Oh, thank you.
I have a fruit tree story if you want.
Yeah, sure, of course.
So one of the things we're eating tonight is dates. And I found that if you throw your date seeds in your compost, you may have some date trees, palm trees growing
Really?
in the garden.
Really?
Yeah, I transplanted it into a pot, so we have a house plant date palm. I don't know if it'll ever produce fruit. It's only about this big now, but it's
That's
real hard to move
amazing.
around though, because it's very spiky. But
that's amazing. I don't think it will grow in Birmingham.
well, we bring it inside every winter.
Right, you would have to, you couldn't plant it in the ground.
There is one though. I have two. One that I actually take care of, and one that I sort of just left. I left it outside. It's still alive, even with our 19-degree night that we've had. So I don't know. It seems to be holding up. It's hardier than I expected, but yeah, you can actually. We've got a date palm. We've got a from grocery store fruit. We also have a pineapple. You can cut the top off and plant it.
Right.
Avocado, I know a lot of people have done that one. And a mango. One of our mango seeds sprouted in a compost.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty incredible.
So, the benefits of composting. Your fruit will turn into new trees.
Yeah, that's it. The world just gives you this stuff.
When I was in China, somebody I was with had a birthday. So the Chinese prepared a cake with white icing and a lot of fruits, including tomatoes on top. So they used it as a fruit.
Wow. It can be very sweet. Tomato jam. Have you ever had like tomato jam?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, they make that. I found this thing. I had this idea. It popped into my head like a month ago. I wondered, does anybody make tomato candy? Well, turns out Koreans. And so you could buy it on Amazon. Tomato, it's like hard candy that tastes like tomato.
Mm.
And it's pretty weird, but I have to say it's pretty good. It tastes like tomato candy, like you're eating this, sweet tomato. Yeah, so they treat it like, raspberry candy or blueberry candy or strawberry candy. Why not tomato candy?
Did you have jelly beans on your Seder plate?
I do. I have Jelly Belly jelly beans because they have actual fruit flavor in them.
Okay.
Therefore, I consider them to be kosher for the Seder.
I didn't think that jelly beans were kosher.
Not all jelly beans are kosher. Many jelly beans have gelatin.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of chewy candies of all kinds. Some have gelatin and some don't. There's different ways to get chewy. Generally speaking, if it has gelatin in it, it's probably not kosher.
Yeah.
unless it is explicitly kosher gelatin, because most gelatin is made not kosher.
That's why I assume any kind of like chewy candy like that is just.
Right, Starburst
Mhm.
has gelatin. A lot of the like those orange slice, you know, all those fruit slice candies,
Mhm.
a lot of that has gelatin in it.
So many stupid things that have gelatin in them that don't need to.
What was that?
There are just a lot of
Oh yeah,
stupid
Skittles,
gelatin in them
Skittles,
that don't need to.
right?
Marshmallows too, I think.
Marshmallows, right. That's the other thing is marshmallows. Kosher marshmallows have gelatin, generally speaking, but it's most often fish gelatin made from fish bones instead of from cow bones or pig hide, like most other gelatins. And there is also vegetable sourced gelatin that's usually made from seaweed.
There's also a brand called Dandies that has a vegan marshmallow option that I believe they use pectin instead of gelatin.
Correct. Those are great. I use those and make like for my Rice Krispie squares because I may seem like I'm a highbrow eater, but I'm also a lowbrow eater, and I just love Rice Krispie squares. So, but very few vegan marshmallows out there.
Mhm. Yeah, Dandies are really good though. I like them.
Yeah, I think they're great. Yeah, they're really good. And they carry them at Sprouts nearby here, so it's not that hard to get. Good. Anybody else? Anything else? Well, thank you, everybody. This was really, really nice to be together. Tuesday nights, I'm running the Seder Masterclass. We're just learning about the Seder and about Tefillah and how to pray and all that stuff. And I hope you'll enjoy and join me for that. And Thursdays at noon Central for the Mishnah class that we just started, and that's really great. It's going to be really, really fun. And then I'm coming into town this coming weekend, so I'll look forward to seeing y'all if y'all are around.